Why does the international community seem to stand idle in the face of the Gaza crisis? This question has echoed in the minds of many as we witness the severity of the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It's a crisis that's not only a matter of human rights, but one that holds political implications on a global scale. From the ongoing battles to the crippling blockade, the people of Gaza are caught in an intense struggle for survival. Yet, the international community, those who hold power and influence on the world stage, seem to be just spectators to this unfolding tragedy. The images that emerge from Gaza are disheartening to say the least. And yet, the world watches, seemingly paralyzed, seemingly indifferent. It's a phenomenon that raises questions about international morality and the very essence of humanitarian intervention. This video aims to investigate the reasons behind this seeming lack of international intervention. We delve into the factors at play, the political chessboard that is the Middle East, and the unanswered question, why isn't more being done? To understand the international response, or lack thereof, we must first look at Israel's role in the crisis. Israel, a small yet influential nation, plays a significant role in the ongoing Gaza crisis. Its geopolitical position and strong alliances with global powers add layers of complexity to the situation. Israel has been at the center of the Gaza crisis since its inception. It's a conflict deeply rooted in history, politics, and territorial disputes. The situation in Gaza is not merely a local issue. It's a geopolitical chess game where the moves are dictated not just by the players on the ground, but also by those watching from the sidelines. Israel, in many ways, is a key player in this chess game. Its actions and policies significantly influence the dynamics of the crisis. However, Israel's strong diplomatic ties, especially with the United States, a global superpower, often shield it from international pressure. The United States' unwavering support for Israel is a well-established fact. This alliance, built on shared strategic interests and mutual cooperation, often influences the international community's response to the Gaza crisis. The US has consistently used its veto power in the United Nations Security Council to block resolutions critical of Israel, thereby limiting the international community's ability to exert pressure. And it's not just the United States. Israel enjoys diplomatic relations with many countries worldwide, including several in the European Union. These alliances often result in a reluctance to criticize Israel publicly or push for a ceasefire for fear of straining diplomatic ties. In addition to these diplomatic considerations, there's also the issue of the perceived threat from militant groups in Gaza. Many countries are wary of appearing to support these groups, further complicating their stance on the crisis. The dynamics of global politics, the strategic alliances, the historical context, and the perceived threats all contribute to the lack of pressure on Israel. The question then arises, why isn't there more pressure on Israel to cease hostilities? The answer, as we've seen, is far from simple, embedded in a web of international politics and alliances. Another key player in this crisis is Egypt, specifically regarding the Rafah border crossing. One might wonder why Egypt, a neighboring country with a shared border, hasn't thrown open the gates of the Rafah crossing to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. To understand this, we must first comprehend the strategic significance of the Rafah border crossing. The Rafah crossing is the only border crossing not controlled by Israel, making it a lifeline for Gaza. It's a gateway for goods, medical supplies, and people to enter and exit the beleaguered strip. However, this crossing has often been a point of contention, its gates opening and closing like an erratic heartbeat, dictated by the pulse of politics and security concerns. Egypt's control over the Rafah crossing is fueled by a complex blend of factors. On one hand, it's a matter of national security. Egypt has been battling an insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula, which borders Gaza. There's a fear that opening the Rafah crossing freely could allow for the movement of militants, exacerbating their domestic security issues. On the other hand, it's a question of diplomacy. Egypt has been playing a delicate balancing act between its alliances and its responsibilities. It has to maintain cordial relations with its allies, including Israel and the United States, who have a vested interest in the region's power dynamics. Yet it's not just about politics. Egypt also has to grapple with the daunting logistics of managing a border crossing that could potentially be flooded with people and goods. The infrastructure, manpower, and resources required are substantial. And then there's the human factor. The plight of the Palestinians resonates deeply with the Egyptian public. Yet, the Egyptian government has to tread carefully, balancing public sentiment with practical realities and political implications. So it's a jigsaw puzzle of national security, international diplomacy, logistical challenges, and public sentiment. The pieces don't always fit neatly together, creating a gridlock that keeps the Rafah crossing's gates more often closed than open. So, if it's not politics, what exactly is stopping Egypt from opening the Rafah crossing? Let's not forget the regional powers, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and their limited role in the crisis. In the complex web of geopolitics, Saudi Arabia and Turkey are significant players. However, their ability to intervene in the Gaza crisis is not as straightforward as it might seem. Let's delve into some of the reasons why. Firstly, Saudi Arabia, a Sunni-majority country, has historically had a tense relationship with the Hamas-led government in Gaza, which is primarily backed by Iran, a Shia-majority nation. This sectarian divide complicates Saudi Arabia's position. While it has called for an end to the violence in Gaza, it has stopped short of offering substantial aid or using its influence to pressurize Israel. On the other hand, Turkey, under the leadership of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has been more vocal in its support for the Palestinians. Erdogan has condemned Israel's actions and called for an international response. Yet Turkey's ability to sway the situation is hampered by its strained relations with Israel, making it a less effective mediator in the crisis. Moreover, both countries are grappling with their domestic issues. Saudi Arabia is navigating its Vision 2030 economic reform plan amidst falling oil prices, while Turkey is dealing with a severe economic crisis. These internal challenges restrict their ability to make bold moves on the international stage. Additionally, Saudi Arabia and Turkey's relations with the US, a key ally of Israel, must be considered. Both nations have significant strategic ties with the US, which they might be unwilling to risk by taking a more assertive stance on the Gaza crisis. In essence, the geopolitical landscape, sectarian divides, domestic issues, and strategic alliances all play a part in limiting the role of Saudi Arabia and Turkey in the Gaza crisis. Despite their regional influence, these nations seem unable to provide substantial aid to Gaza. But why? This is a question that remains at the heart of their complex relationship with the ongoing crisis. Pulling all these threads together helps us understand the broader picture. We've delved into the unanswered questions, the role of Israel, the situation at the Egyptian border, and the positions of Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Each of these components is a thread in the intricate tapestry of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Palestine. Let's start with the Israel factor. Israel's strategic interests and security concerns have influenced its actions, and the international community's response, or lack thereof, is often dictated by these considerations. The world watches, often in silence, as the conflict unfolds, grappling with the complexities of intervening in a situation where the lines between right and wrong are not always clear-cut. Then there's the Egyptian border. The closed Rafah crossing signifies the difficult position Egypt finds itself in. On one hand, it shares a border with Gaza and empathizes with the plight of the Palestinians. On the other, it has its own national security concerns to consider, leading to a delicate balancing act that often leaves the border gates closed. The roles of Saudi Arabia and Turkey are also significant. As regional powers, they have the potential to sway the course of events. However, their influence is limited by geopolitical constraints and their own national interests. They sympathize with the Palestinians, but their hands are tied by a myriad of factors beyond their immediate control. All these elements intertwine to create a complex situation where intervention is not as straightforward as it might seem. The international community faces a challenging task, one that requires careful navigation through a labyrinth of interests, alliances, and potential consequences. The Gaza crisis is not a standalone issue, it is a piece in the larger puzzle of Middle Eastern politics. It's not simply a matter of why more isn't being done, but rather what can realistically be achieved given the circumstances. The Gaza crisis is a complex issue, with many players and interests at stake. It's not just a question of why the international community isn't doing more, but a question of what it can realistically do, given the circumstances. In conclusion, the international response to the Gaza crisis is as complex as the crisis itself. From our exploration, it becomes evident that several factors are at play. each with its own intricate web of complexities and implications. We've discussed the role of Israel and the lack of international pressure for a ceasefire. We've looked at Egypt's closed Rafah border and the reasons behind its firm stance. We've also delved into the seemingly limited influence of Saudi Arabia and Turkey, despite their regional prominence. But remember, these elements are just a fraction of the larger picture. The international response, or lack thereof, is influenced not just by these factors, but also by a myriad of geopolitical considerations, regional power struggles, and historical contexts. And so, the question isn't simply why the world isn't doing more, but what it can do within this complex web of geopolitics and regional power struggles.